Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Sharon Huang. I'm a licensed psychologist. I'm the founder of Harmony Psychological Services, where I provide therapy to children, adolescents, parents, and families. I also provide parent consultation. And I also work part-time as a nationally certified school psychologist with a public middle school.
Hi, I'm Joanna Kidder. I am the founder of Kidder Educational Consulting. I spent 17 years working in public education, first as a general education teacher in an elementary school, and then as a special education teacher in both elementary and middle school in self-contained and general education programming, before moving out of the classroom and into a consulting role.
So Ms. Kidder and I have been in education for a long time. And as longtime educators, we know firsthand all the challenging school demands that make it difficult for kids who don't always have the necessary executive function skills, especially at the secondary level. So we're here today to support you so you can help your kids boost these skills over the summer for a smoother transition to the school year. So we'll be learning about executive functioning, what it is, and what specific skills make it up. We'll talk about some pain points at home and how they can be supported via executive function skills. And we'll learn easy and practical strategies that we can use in the home setting to build these skills and during the summer, which is a great time to do that. And we'll also talk about how to transfer these skills into skills we'll need it in the school year in the fall. And as I said, summer is a great time to build executive function skills because you don't have to deal with the stress of the morning rush or afternoon activities, sports, exercise, classes, etc. So let's dive right into what executive function skills are. Executive function skills are the mental processes that we use to help us not just focus our attention, but also remember instructions and change from task to task. So if you think of your brain as having an air traffic control system where the aircrafts have to land and take off at specific times or locations, as well as having backup system in case there's an emergency or inclement weather. That's what your brain's executive function system does. It helps things run smoothly, helps you organize your thoughts, regulate your emotions, and respond to situations that can be unexpected. And strong executive function skills are really important for kids. It doesn't just help them succeed in school, but it also helps them in their lives. It helps them build healthy relationships and also helps them feel more confident and capable. And as educators, unfortunately, in the school setting, we don't explicitly teach executive function skills all the time, especially um, in the middle school when it's a time where executive function skills are in high demand. So since we don't explicitly teach these skills, it's important for us as parents to recognize how we can teach these skills at home and support our kids in developing them. These skills don't actually fully develop until our kids are around 25. So there's a long time where they're not getting that instruction. So it's important to build these in. Okay, so I'll talk about some specific executive function skills. And the first one that develops right during infancy is called response inhibition. So basically, it's being able to stop and think, stop before you take an action. So, for example, if you're thinking before you speak, waiting for your turn in a game, or if you're raising your hand to be called on, those all require response inhibition. And this is especially hard for younger kids. It can also be hard for adults. As adults, sometimes we get frustrated with our kids and we might want to yell, and we have to use that response inhibition so that we don't do that. Okay. Working memory is another executive function skill. It requires you to keep information in your head, but you're also manipulating that information. For example, if you're trying to remember a 7-digit phone number, remembering directions, doing some mental math, or taking notes, these all require working memory. Okay. Emotional control is a tough one for a lot of kids, especially the ages um, of teenagers and toddlers. The, so the kids who are really young might cry when they get frustrated. I know my son, who is a fan of Brawl Stars, often gets upset and doesn't have good emotion control when he loses. Or you might have a teenager who is upset when you set a limit for them. So emotional control is tough. One easy strategy to use is to validate their feelings, to help them understand that you hear them and label these feelings, especially for younger kids. Okay, flexibility is not just being able to adapt to changes, but also learning new information and dealing with any setbacks that come about. So in the summer, you might be going to the pool a lot, but it might seem like a beautiful day and suddenly it starts pouring. So what do? You have to be flexible. You have to try to figure out what alternate plans you could do. Okay, sustained attention is really challenging nowadays with the onset of all the screen time. It's not just paying attention, but it's really paying attention for an extended period of time and trying to attend to a task despite all the distractions that are around. And because of the screen time usage that has been kind of increasing in the last couple of years, kids are so used to fast information and not having to focus for a long period of time. So this is a tough skill, not just for kids with ADHD, but for everyone now. So if you are reading a book or studying for a test, these are all skills that require sustained attention. Okay, task initiation sometimes can be mistaken for being lazy or unmotivated, but in fact, when we call our kids lazy or unmotivated, they're really having challenges with task initiation. They don't know how to get started without a delay. They don't know how to be efficient or timely. For example, you might ask your child to wash dishes without being asked or get started on homework without being asked, but it takes them forever. It's not because they're lazy, it's because they don't know how to initiate tasks. Okay, planning and prioritizing are closely related. So, planning is being able to prepare for the future because you want to accomplish a task. And prioritizing is looking at your plans and trying to figure out what is the most feasible, what is most important. So, for example, when you plan a trip in the summer, you have to prioritize what to bring on the trip because you can't obviously bring everything, especially when you're traveling overseas. And one easy strategy to use is if you have younger kids, you can actually help them create a packing list and have them pack comfort and entertainment items. Even toddlers can do this. And obviously, with an older kid, you can have them give them a packing list and have them pack their entire um, trips items and make sure that they prioritize and not bring everything. With my almost 15-year-old daughter, we always have to give her a small suitcase so she can't pack 20 articles of clothing when we're only going somewhere for 5 days. So prioritizing is key. Okay, organization is another executive function skill that is actually an advanced skill. It doesn't, it's not just about putting things away, but it's also having a system that helps you keep track of your belongings. So, for example, you might be asking your kids to put toys away where they belong in a specific area, or you might be asking your teenagers to put dishes away after they're cleaned. So, in school, this might look like having a binder that's organized, having folders for 7 different classes or color-coded tabs. So organization is a skill that we develop a little bit later in life. Okay, so time management is also an advanced skill. It's being able to estimate how much time, but not just estimating the time, but also sticking to that time. And this is really difficult for kids. They kind of grossly underestimate how much time they spend on something, especially work. So it's really important to help them with this. So, for example, when they're studying for an exam, working on a big project, making sure that they kind of write down when they're going to start and when they end can help them with the time management. And also, I believe Ms. Kidder will talk about this later, but having a timer can be very helpful, whether it's a visual timer or a timer on their phone. That can all support them with time management. Okay. And I realize I have a lot of soccer imagery because I'm a soccer mom. Um, but goal-directed persistence is being able to develop a goal and follow through with that goal. There might be some distractions or setbacks in the way, but continuing to pursue that goal is goal-directed persistence. So, for example, if your child wants to save money to buy a phone, maybe they're in 8th grade and ready for that, or if they are completing a big project, or even learning an instrument in middle school or learning a new language, those all require goal-directed persistence.
We wanted to take a moment to find out where in your lives you find executive functioning skills creating pain, what I call pain points, or times in your day that frequently create difficulty, arguments, breakdowns, in you because of your children's weak executive functioning skills. In our house, it is getting out the door in the morning. I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, and the mornings are rough. And my husband has the unfortunate blessing of being married to me. And so when he says to me every single morning, why are these mornings so hard? Why are we struggling with this every single day? And I say to him, well, everyone is. Um, he doesn't really feel heard. So I need to work on that. But we were curious to see, where do you find those challenges in your day? So hopefully a poll has popped up for you to answer, and we'll give you just a couple seconds to take a look. So it looks like these common pain points are common for you as well. Getting started on homework, sustaining focus on homework, transitioning through the day, the cleaning up and organizing of spaces, and everything are all, you are not alone. These are things that are so challenging for our kids, for our households, and do directly stem from weak executive functioning skills. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. And we're going to start looking at ways that we can kind of mitigate these pain points and also why these are so challenging. And I couldn't help myself. We're going to start off with a clip from Bluey, which, if you have aged out of children's television, I apologize for. But I just really couldn't find anything better to summarize this pain point of getting ready for the day. And Dr. Wong, I think you have to click it.
Oh, sorry.
Make sure you take all the swimming stuff.
Yeah, we got it covered.
Don't just get the fun stuff, I mean the bag of stuff.
Can I have my Rashi?
Did you bring it?
No.
Then no.
Dad, did we bring sunscreen?
Oh, no, I didn't.
It's okay, we don't need sunscreen.
Yes, we do. We'll just have to stay in the shady bit, and we'll put our hats on.
What hats?
Like I said, I just couldn't find anything better to summarize those getting out the door in the morning moments than Bluey. Some of the things that are challenging about this is because it really asks our kids and our parenting selves to think about what's coming up ahead, not just the routine things are that we need every single day, but also the plan B items that if it's going to rain later, I might need, or the if my pencil breaks, I'm going to need a pencil sharpener type things that our children with weak executive functioning skills have a hard time predicting. Taking some time before you're walking out the door in the morning to work on checklists and pre-packing is so important. And I know that these seem really sort of intuitive for us as adults because we have done these things day in, day out for our entire lives since we were in school. So, of course, you should know that you should bring your pencil sharpener and more than one pencil. And of course, you should know that you should bring your raincoat when it's raining. But for our kids who haven't had these lived experiences, often enough that they've become muscle memory, it's really challenging. Children also can do well with leaving things in their cars or backpacks so that they're not coming in and out every day if they don't have to.
Make sure you take all the swimming stuff.
Yeah, we got it covered.
Sorry about that.
There we go. No worries. Who doesn't love watching Bluey twice? That idea of getting started on and sustaining focus on a less preferred task. So that's something like homework or a chore. Getting started on something you don't want to do and having the ability to stick with it are two different executive functioning challenges. Working up that motivation to start something, that task initiation, to start an activity when it's not exciting for you, and then being able to say, I have to focus in on this and avoid or block out distractions while I am doing it is really challenging. We see this in the summer, or at least I have already started to see it in the summer with my kids when they're like, it's boring, I'm bored. And they don't really know what to do with themselves because they don't have the initiative to go find something. Well, they're looking for like a dopamine hit or something fun and exciting all of the time. And when we transition into a quieter space in our day during the summer, that's when kids get bored and then sort of end up in trouble or creating some plans that maybe aren't exactly what we would want them to be doing because when kids are bored, that's what they do. We see it a lot during the school year with homework. There's this task avoidance of what else can I find to do with myself that maybe isn't going to work out well for me, but avoids me having to start my homework. Strategies that can work with students on getting started, again, our checklist. I'm a big fan of using a Pomodoro timer situation, which is essentially having kids work in increments. If you do hit workouts where you work really hard for 30 seconds, then you get a break for 30 seconds, it's a similar concept, but for less preferred tasks. So your kids would pick a time that they're going to work for 10 minutes without doing anything else, and then they have a short break and they go back and forth on that, transitioning in and out of work, but at least knowing for themselves, where's my stop point, where's my start point. Another really important thing for kiddos who struggle with focusing is purposefully picking a location for those less preferred tasks. Transitions are similar to getting started on a less preferred task because we're moving away from something that's holding our focus into something that maybe is exciting or not exciting. Kids can have difficulty with these transitions, regardless of if what they're transitioning into is something fun. That shift of focus requires some emotional flexibility. That is another executive functioning skill coming into play. Many students, even students who have trouble with focusing in a classroom or on a less preferred task, have their own interests that they hyper focus in on. And asking them to shift out of that hyper focus can be really challenging. Emotional regulation plays a huge part here, being able to see the big picture that we're not asking kids to transition away from something forever necessarily. They're going to have a chance to come back to what it is that they want to be doing, even if it's not as soon as they'd like. Advanced warning and visual timers are really helpful here, as are teaching calming strategies. The time to teach a calming strategy is not in the moment when a child needs a calming strategy. It is way before and often when modeling with yourself. My 2-year-old, well, she's almost 3 now, went through a phase maybe 6 months ago where she would notice that when I was feeling frustrated with her, and she would put her hands on the side of my face and she would say, Mama, you take a big breath. And I would take the big breath that she was asking me to take, and I'd breathe out, and she'd say, Mama, you feel better now? And I would say, Yep, I feel great. She'd go on and she'd say, Okay, I'm going to do whatever activity it was that I wanted to do, but I'm glad you feel better now. But when I turned it back on her 6 months ago and I said, Okay, Shelby, take a big breath, there was no way she was able to access that part of her brain to take a big breath. We are slowly turning the corner, but that takes a lot of explicit modeling on your part as the parent to show what you are doing to keep yourself calm. A palate cleanser between two activities can also be really helpful for a transition. A lot of times your kids are familiar with these palate cleansing activities as like in elementary school, when they do, I can't remember the name of the videos now, but the little like dance videos that teachers will have them do in between two academic lessons that get a brain break, that get them up and moving. Something that breaks the concentration but doesn't lead directly into the next thing you're doing, and it just gives kids a pause between activities, can really help with that emotional regulation and the transitioning piece because they're doing something fun in the middle. Cleaning up and organizing space is something that is challenging for many of us for our entire lives from childhood through adulthood. It is an incredibly complex executive functioning skill. Somebody once told me that there are pilers and filers. And the filers are people who have a place for everything and everything has its place. And the pilers are people who do similarly to what my picture is showing here, make their piles. And there actually is nothing wrong with being a piler. If your child is a piler at this stage in their life, that's okay if their piles have meaning. So one thing to be doing with your children is when you see those piles, asking what they represent. Can you tell me what this pile of stuff is? Because if not, then we have a problem. But if you can tell me this is my pile of social studies homework with my books, and this is my pile of instrumental music paper and what I need to practice, and everything sort of is identifiable in some way, shape, or form, that is a system of organization, even if it's not the one that we would like to see when we walk into a bedroom. Other things that can help kids with cleaning up and organizing space, when you walk in and when your kids walk into an incredibly messy space, it is really overwhelming to know where to start. Giving kids a chunk of work to do at a time, a list or a visual of what do we need to do, before you get started can really help with that feeling of overwhelming, that meltdown of like, I can't do it. There's too much. I don't know where anything goes. If you take a moment and say, okay, let's start just with the books. Let's find all your books and put them back on your bookshelf. And then move on to the next piece of cleaning up and organizing. That helps your child see that this task is not never ending, that progress is getting made, and it helps them feel less overwhelmed. Another thing I tell, especially my middle schoolers, to do is to do it before you sit down. If you know something has to go somewhere and you're walking into a room or you're coming home and you're throwing your backpack on the floor, before you sit down, put away the things you need to put away. Because once you sit down, you are not getting back up to organize. And then creating a predictable schedule with cleaning up and organizing, having a time in your week or every couple of days, depending on the child's need, to come back and look at their materials, their room, their binder, whatever organizational space we're talking about, and having a schedule of we're going to look at this every other day. When we look at it, we're going to make sure all of our papers go into the three ring holes in the correct subject. We're going to make sure that anything needs to be turned in is put in a special spot. And kids knowing that that time is coming will help them stay on top of it as well. Planning activities and assignments. One of two things tends to happen here with planners. Uh, so many kids, especially as we get to fourth, fifth grade, sixth grade, seventh grade, and we're asking them to write down their homework, are like, I'm going to remember it. I don't have to write that down. I'm going to remember it. And they don't. Spoiler, they don't. Or they look at what they have to write down and they're so overwhelmed with what's written down in their books that they don't ever open the book, and they avoid it because of that feeling of I'm never going to finish it. There's so much work to be done. The key here with kid buy-in, with student buy-in, is to make it fun. When kids feel success with a strategy, they're more likely to continue to do it. So when we talk about planning and organizing our assignments, if we're making it fun by using fun materials or fun school supplies, we're reviewing it daily, we're chunking our larger assignments into shorter pieces. So if we have a week to complete an assignment, it's not let's do the whole thing at once. It's writing down each chunk that gets completed so that kids have a feeling of success to check off that completed chunk. And again, coming back to writing it down, the number of children who tell me they do not need to write it down because they will remember is staggering. And it just isn't a skill that is going to set them up for success as they move through their higher academic years and then into adulthood.
Okay, so a lot of those pain points mentioned by Ms. Kidder can be kind of supported through building executive function skills at home in the summer. And actually, what I wanted to do before I get into that is I wanted to put out a poll. I'm just curious how old your kids are. I wanted to do it in the beginning, but now that there are more people here, I think it would be a good time. So if you should see a poll pop up on your screen. So if you feel comfortable, if you would let us know how old your kids are, maybe you have multiple kids or one kid, it just helps for us to kind of get a sense of how old they are. Okay, great. Oh, so we have a lot of different ages. We have 29% under 5, 57% 5 to 10, 29% 11 to 14, and 14% over 18. Okay, great. And we did when we made this presentation, we made sure that we included strategies for all ages. So one strategy you can build in right away is to create a predictable routine. Even a loose and flexible kind of routine in the summer can be helpful because it helps kids understand predictability and also builds them some independence. So for example, kids who are younger, who are toddlers, or kids with language and communication needs could even benefit from a visual schedule. And if you have a teenager, a summer job, internship, or any sort of volunteer work can build in some natural routines for them. So real world settings are really great places for teens, not just to learn about communication and responsibility, but also about time management, organization, and task initiation. Okay, so I have an example of a summer routine, and this is kind of an aspirational routine because I try to include a lot of activities to decrease the amount of screen time. But here's an example you can use. You can modify it and base it on your family's needs and make it as loose and flexible as you'd like. Okay, another strategy you could try is to involve your kids in a summer activity. So you have, for those of you with kids under 5 and younger, having them plan a picnic or a lemonade stand could be helpful. Older kids could plan a whole day trip or a family vacation somewhere, or even a garage sale. And when you have your kids plan a summer activity, ask them what steps go into that activity, and help them fill in any gaps. And this teaches them sequencing and responsibility, and also teaches them to think ahead as well as kind of manage their time and initiate tasks. You have to try to encourage them to go through all the planning activities such as list supplies, set a date, and follow through with the plan. Okay. Teaching your kids to cook or bake is an excellent strategy to teach kids a lot of executive function skills such as planning, working memory, and flexibility. And if you have younger kids, you can even have them make their own lunches and give them some criteria so they don't just fill their lunches with Doritos or something. But helping your kids follow through a whole recipe from start to finish is helpful for younger kids. And if you have an older kid, they can go through the whole recipe. I actually used this strategy with my daughter, almost 15-year-old, a couple of weeks ago, and she wanted to make buttermilk pancakes, which is pretty straightforward until you get to the pancake flipping part. And I don't know about you, but that's not my favorite thing to do. And my daughter had never done it before, and I had to exercise my response inhibition. I had to not step in and try to take over and help her do it, even though I knew what she was doing wrong. And because I did that, she had to use her planning skills to try to figure out how to make the next pancake better, and then also her working memory to remember what she did wrong and be flexible when things didn't turn out her way. So this is an example of how cooking can be very beneficial for developing executive function skills. Okay. And working on summer projects is also a great way to help your child build goal-directed persistence. Having some sort of goal that they set, and also help them kind of break that goal down, especially into smaller chunks that they can feel that they can achieve. That builds a lot of confidence. If they make goals that are too lofty, they could sometimes give up and feel frustrated. Summertime is a great time to grow a garden, finish a book series, train for a 5K, just helping your kids try to develop some sort of goal and checking in with them from time to time to see how their progress is. So goal-directed persistence is an executive function task that's very advanced and actually includes a lot of other executive function skills such as sustained attention and being able to plan and organize and be flexible. So I have a goal setting worksheet as an example for you to use. I also have a PDF version I can send you if you're interested. But I love this sheet because it has a place for you to list problems that might arise and possible solutions. So this teaches kids flexibility and also planning, and also has an area that allows kids to break down their goals to more smaller achievable chunks so they can write down specific tasks they need to achieve their goal, which teaches them sequencing, but also working memory. It helps them not feel overwhelmed. So this is a great worksheet to use either during the summer or during the school year to help kids set and follow through with their goals. Okay. So the next strategy might seem a little odd. I'm recommending that you have your kids be bored. And boredom, as Ms. Kidder actually mentioned earlier, is really helpful for teaching executive function skills because when your kids are bored, what did they usually do? If like put in a chat what your kids usually do when they're bored. Okay, so I know that my kids often will complain. My son, who's a little younger, will just say, "Oh, I'm so bored. I don't have anything to do," even though he has like 500 toys. So it sounds like some other kids will act moody. Some kids will go outside, which is great. Some kids will fight with each other. So kids have a lot of emotional challenges. Oh, color on the wall, get into trouble. Yeah, boredom can get kids really emotional, right? So when they're feeling emotional, they have to learn how to manage these emotions, especially when you don't, if you try not to step in. So it teaches them and helps them build emotional resilience, and they have to be able to inhibit some of these strong responses and problem solve. What can I do with my time? I have so many non-screen activities I could do. Oops, I'm sorry, I went forward by accident. But You can give them some art supplies, have them create and build things. So don't try to fill every minute. Just see if they can problem solve and take some time to help them build their emotional resilience and give them some open-ended toys and non-digital ways to relax. And teenagers can, they can create music or read. There's a lot of things that are not focused on the screen. Okay, so this next one is really geared more towards teenagers and older kids, practicing real life decision making. So maybe your teenager wants to buy a car. Maybe they just got their driver's license, um, and that's a big purchase. So kind of talking through that and helping them with consequences and kind of modeling thoughtful problem solving for them, trying to figure out what is the problem, exploring different solutions, evaluating the solutions, and then finally deciding on the most feasible solution. So having your kids kind of practice decision making will go a long way. It teaches them so many executive function skills, helping them prevent some impulsivity. So it's teaching them response inhibition as well as controlling their emotions when they feel strongly about some decisions, and also being flexible because not everything will go the way they want. Okay, and last but not least, modeling and sharing your own executive function tools goes a long way because children really learn best from modeling, especially teenagers. So those of you who have teenagers, you might notice that when you tell your teen to do something, they don't always listen or say they already know how to do it. But when you model something for them, they are watching you and they are following your footsteps. So that can be a very helpful tool. So one tool that I really like is called any.do, and it's a very simple and clean um, app. And basically you can just write down your to-do list and even lets you just cross off what you did, kind of like a paper to-do list. So I really love that app. Some other apps are Notion, which helps us prioritizing. There's also a to-do app called Todoist, and that incorporates a calendar and a to-do list, which is also helpful. And then, of course, Paper Planner is great, and sticky notes, any sort of executive function tools. You can also model some language for your kids. You can say, when I feel stressed or overwhelmed, I have to use some checklists or to-do lists or planners so I can keep track of things. Or when things change or something doesn't go my way, I have to kind of adjust and be flexible. So use some of those executive function words so that you're modeling both language and behavior for them.
Dr. Huang just went through so many great strategies for things we can do during the summer to help our kids develop executive functioning skills. And one of the biggest benefits of working on executive functioning over the summer is the bridge into fall. During the summer, kids really have sort of a mental break in terms of their academic load and their academic stress, and they have a chance to focus on some of these less academic skills. When kids walk back into the building in August, which will be here before we know it, even though they're still walking out of buildings in June right now, um, schools, for the most part, do not have the time to go back and review the executive functioning skills that your children just finished learning this year. Nor do they take the time to explicitly share with students the expectations of those executive functioning skills in the classroom. So when we work on these skills during the summer, and then we explicitly say to our kids, here's how what we did in the summer will help you this fall, we're giving kids a huge boost into being more successful in their classrooms come the end of August. So those bridges look something like what is on the screen in front of you. For creating a summer schedule, that obviously translates into our school day schedule and our after school schedule, but it also is helping students to break down the idea of their schedule and what they need to be considering during their schedule. For example, if their schedule is early morning swim team practice, camp, come home, TV time, and then afternoon or evening activity. They're learning throughout the day where they need to eat, where they need to take a break, where they need to be drinking water, what materials they need for those different activities. And that translates directly into their school day. They don't have the same ability in their school day to have the autonomy to say, I need a break right now. But they do have the ability to look at their school day schedule and identify what classes are going to be more exhausting for them, more mentally stimulating or mentally stressful, and what they can do within their day to give themselves a break before walking into the next class. When we talk about planning summer fun, that translates directly into planning with group projects and longer assignments. But I want to talk for a minute about group projects because in the summer they have a chance to decompress with friends, hang out with friends, and work on their social skills as well as their executive functioning skills. And those group projects are really challenging for a lot of students because of the social dynamic. When it comes to managing a large assignment that has many moving pieces that need to be assigned and worked on in individual pieces and then brought back together with their peers, there's a lot of planning going on. And students don't always break down each planning point for those group assignments. If when you're planning your summer fun activities, you're talking about what are we doing? The overall goal is that we are getting ready to go to a movie outside under the stars. What do we need to get to the overall goal? And who's responsible for different pieces of this activity? That's really setting students up for success when they look at a group project and they say, okay, the overall goal is that we're creating a trifold board on the Greek aqueducts. Who's doing what and how are we breaking this down so that we are all achieving the goal? Cooking and baking is so much fun and does not lend itself to anything nearly as fun throughout the day once you're back in the school. However, it does teach students about material management through the day. When you are cooking or baking, if we as parents are able to step back a little bit, students are going to learn what it feels like to run out of an ingredient halfway through because we didn't check to see, do we have enough sugar or buttermilk to make these pancakes? Students are going to learn that it's really not efficient to go back into the refrigerator 4 times to grab 4 different ingredients. And that if they're in the middle of cooking something and now all of a sudden they need to cut, that's going to maybe burn something. And that translates directly into our materials management throughout the day. What do I need to do to set up myself for success? It doesn't work well for me if I get to third period and I have no pencils and no pencil sharpener. I don't have my agenda book, so I can't go to the bathroom. Um, what do I need to do to set myself up for that successful day with my materials? Does that look like me going back to my locker twice at identified times in the day, planning my day so that I don't have to carry every single material with me through the day? Or do I need to carry every single material through the day because I don't have time when I'm going from class to class to make that extra locker stop? When students are planning summer projects, that again equates into these long-term assignments, breaking things down and looking at small pieces. It also, believe it or not, translates into essay writing, which is something that so many students struggle with. When we say we're going to write an essay, even with teachers breaking things down with a graphic organizer, saying today we're only working on an introduction paragraph or we're only working on body paragraph 1, students sort of lose sight of what the goal of an essay is and how all the pieces of an essay come together to create a final product. When they're working on summer projects and they're doing all these small pieces, they're helping themselves to see that when you plan something out and you put it all together, you are creating something new just the way you would in an essay. When we come back to boring and downtime, that practice of downtime and being bored at home is going to help kids to focus on boring classes because every kid will have at least one next year, I'm sorry to say. Not every class can be fun all of the time, and some subjects are just boring for different kids, but they have to get through them. And so developing that muscle of being able to pay attention to something, even when it's not the most exciting thing, is really one of the most important skills that you can work on with your children before they head in, especially for kids in middle school and high school, where those classes become much more rigorous and can either be really interesting because they're hitting on your child's interest because they have an elective, or really boring because they're a graduation requirement that your child has to take, even though they have no interest in whatever class they might need to take. We also already touched on this a little bit, and many of you noticed this in the comments that you put in the chat, that when kids are bored, they get into trouble. So as for our elementary school students, when they are bored and they don't know what to do with themselves and they don't have the stamina to sit with being bored for a minute or to constructively channel that boredom, they end up creating problems during lunch and recess. So that giving your child the tool of discomfort with boredom is really a positive for them. When it comes to decision making, Dr. Huang talked about how as we get older, there are more decisions to make outside of school that have pretty significant consequences if you're not thoughtful in them. And that's true within the school day also. As students get older, they get to pick more of their classes, which is a great thing, but also has some consequences. If you are somebody who doesn't like to pick a language and you go, do the 2 years of language that you need to do, and then you are bored with your language and you don't want to continue on with it, that can be fine for many students. But if the goal for a student is to get into a certain type of university, they may need more than 2 years of language. And so that idea of picking the elective, of picking something for the short term good or for the long term goal, and talking through the positives and the consequences in school is really important. Similarly, the idea of making decisions around assignments. Children will in elementary school be given minimal assignments for homework, but as they get older, they're going to have more and more assignments, which we'll talk about how they organize those in a moment. But part of the executive functioning of completing work is knowing the strategy that works best for you on how to complete the work. And this is really individual. So some students might want to start with the hardest and longest assignment, get it off their plate, get it out of the way, and leave the easier assignments for last. Some students might work in the absolute opposite direction and want to get all the easy stuff off their plate first before, and then they can say, okay, I just have this one hard thing to do. And when that's done, there's nothing behind it. I will have used up all of my stamina, but that's okay because there's nothing else I need to do. And other students might prefer to go back and forth between a longer, harder task and a shorter, easy task. And knowing the process of making a decision, of thinking through the pros and the cons of all of those different strategies and picking the one that feels best for a student is really important. Finally, thinking about tools. We already talked a little bit about planners and agenda books and how they can be so fun now, especially as we start the beginning of the year with new school supplies and new sticky notes and color coding things. There are ways to really dig into organizing and using planners and agenda books that can feel fun when students are given choice. This also ties into work processes. Where do I work? How do I work? How do I complete a task? Without hitting a burnout. So am I using something like a Pomodoro timer where I'm working and coming back to it, taking a break, coming back to it? Am I somebody who prefers to really sit for a long block of time and work through an assignment from start to finish? And what study tools help students? Students are not taught explicitly how to study in elementary school or middle school. So a lot of the work of studying feels very passive to students, that they read something and then they should remember it, and that's study. And I read it, I read my book, and now I'm done studying. But knowing how to use a flashcard, that we're not just writing something down on a flashcard and then not coming back to, but we're playing memory with it or playing a matching activity with it, that we are using tools in a way that is actively forcing us to think about the work that we are doing is really important. The most important thing with all of these skills is that they're really individually important to students in different ways. And the most important thing you can be doing with any of these skills is asking your students, how did that work for you? And sometimes it's going to work great, and sometimes it's going to be a fail. And it might be a fail because they didn't use a skill. But asking, how did that work for you? What went well? What didn't go well? What surprised you? So that students are being forced to think about what did they do and what skills did they use is the most powerful thing you can be doing, because the executive functioning skills are often unseen and unnamed, and we just sort of wave our magic wands and say, like, do these things, and kids don't realize what they're doing. And if they don't know what they're doing, then they can't do it better the next time. So asking for what was hard and brainstorming those ways and then brainstorming what makes them better the next time around is incredibly important, as is what Dr. Huang already talked about, which is you explicitly naming the skills and the strategies that you are using to break down these tasks and to be successful in your everyday life. We wanted to pause and take a moment. We've got about 10 minutes left that we're thinking about for this evening, and we wanted to take a moment to see if anybody had specific scenarios that they wanted to share out and get some thoughts on how you could be supporting those executive function skills or those pain points better. So if you have anything that you'd like to share, I'm going to stop talking for just a moment, and feel free to share either in chat or to unmute yourself if that's easier. And with that, we're going to go ahead and conclude. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I hope that you found something informative and helpful to take away and to help you support your kids. You guys are doing the real work. And the fact that you are here this evening learning with us means that you are doing an incredible job parenting your children. So they are lucky to have you. If you'd like to reach us in the future, our contact information is on the screen now. And Dr. Huang just shared a link for some feedback for today's presentation that we would love to get from you if you have just a few moments.